Hello, class. So now that you guys have all read a few cases and interacted with them a little bit in the discussions, I thought what I'd do is go over a few of the cases, kind of give you guys some pointers, kind of my expectations, some things to think about even specifically from these cases. So in this video, I'm gonna look at the cases that we had in chapter 4, the cases that were specifically related to arbitration, and hopefully you found them somewhat interesting. But let me point out a few things. First of all, I created the other video on how to brief a case, and that's more so just kind of an FYI, just to kind of help you guys process and think through cases as you read them. I'm not going to have you officially brief any cases and turn into me briefs. At one point in time, I was thinking maybe I would have you do that, but I'm not going to have you do that. But that video will hopefully help you think through a case as you read it, because every case has an issue, and that is what question is the court attempting to answer. And then after that, the court will more often than not list the law, what law is applicable, and then of course it will apply the law to these particular facts and this particular situation, and then come up with a conclusion. And so if you can find those things in a case, I think you're well on your way to understanding what's going on in the case. So, a couple things. First of all, here is the case as it appears in our textbook. The first case that you read, AT&T versus Concepcion, and that, of course, then is that's the working title of the case. Most of the time, you've got plaintiff and then defendant, right? So AT&T is essentially suing Concepcion. They went all through the California courts, and now they're at the U.S. Supreme Court. They are suing because they do not want Concepcion to be able to have a class arbitration, right? And we'll get into that more in a second. So that's the title of the case. After that, this is the court that the case was in, U.S. Supreme Court. Then we've got the cite. This is what the S or a C-I-T-E. It's the citation. And cite is short for citation. And that's where you can find this case. Now, this citation is not your typical citation. You'll see the actual citation for this case in a second when I pull the case up from the Supreme Court website. But this is where you can find this particular case in Lexis, which is a legal database. It's actually all online, but anyway, this is the Lexis site. For whatever reason, our book, probably maybe when this book originally was published, the actual site maybe wasn't available yet, but where it could be found on Lexis was available. So, okay. Anyway, moving on. Getting into the actual text. What you've got first is our book's, it's not a summary of the case, but our book is basically condensing a bunch of information using their own words. And that's what you've always got here first in italics. Normally what you're going to find in that paragraph or in those paragraphs, as the case may be, is the basic facts. What's going on? Why do we have this lawsuit? And you're going to get the procedural history. The procedural history, of course, would be what's happened thus far. What happened in the lower court? What happened in the appellate court if it was already appealed once? So in this case, we're at the Supreme Court of the United States. This case started at a lower court. It was appealed once in California. Then it was appealed again to the California Supreme Court. AT&T kept losing, and now AT&T is appealing to the United States Supreme Court. AT&T obviously feels pretty strongly about this case. So that's that first paragraph. Then you'll see here Justice Scalia, or you'll be a judge's name. That's who actually wrote this opinion. And so in this particular case, as you may know, the Supreme Court has 9 Supreme Court justices. And this particular case, 5 of them, this was a 5-4 decision. 5 of them agreed along with Scalia. Scalia wrote the opinion. And then there were 4 of them that were dissenting judges. So Scalia wrote this opinion of the majority. And then what I wanted to point out to you, and I'll show you this again in a second, all of these words then are the actual words from the case. Again, our book condenses it, but they're the actual words, as we'll see in a second. In fact, let's go ahead and go there. If you wanted to find out more about this case, and it's easy to find out about Supreme Court cases, they're always going to be discussed and written about. What you can do is, that's not where I wanted to go. What you can do is go to just go to Google and type in the name of the case. So ATT versus, I typed it in before, but it's probably going to come up pretty quick for you. But there it is, AT&T versus Concepcion. And then this first link here will take you right to the Supreme Court opinion. This is the full text of the opinion. This is a PDF, but the way it's formatted is because this will go into a book. And in fact, now we can see the actual citation of the case. Let's see. We can see the actual citation right here at the top of this page. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. So here's the actual citation of the case. So 563, what is that? Well, that's the volume number. So in other words, there have been 563 individual volumes, which are actual books, where Supreme Court cases are in print. And if you go to a law library, you probably find an entire bookcase full of Supreme Court decisions. And if you go to book number 563 and pull it off the shelf, you will find this case on page, well, here's where the page number would go. We don't have the page number for this particular PDF. This was probably printed and created very shortly after the case was decided, and the actual page number in the volume wasn't determined yet. We could find that whole, but that would be the entire site. Cite as 563 US, and then there'd be a page number. So, anyway, what we've got then here is the actual, like I said, this is the actual opinion that would be printed. Many times the Supreme Court will create a syllabus, or it's a summary of what the whole case is. And so this is a summary that, again, you could read this couple pages here and kind of get the idea of what the case is about. And that's what our book took its information from in this particular situation. In fact, if you start right here, so here's some information about the case, facts and so forth, procedural history. Here's the holding, what the court decided. And then you can see here's some of the reasoning behind the holding. And so right here, letter A, Section 2 reflects a, quote, liberal federal policy favoring arbitration, unquote. And by the way, right after that is another case, Moses Memorial Hospital versus Mercury Construction, and then the citation for that case. That is a very, very, very typical. I mean, any Supreme Court decision is going to cite previous cases, and that's because if you would have read, I believe, Chapter 3 of our book, you kind of would have given you a little bit of background. But the U.S. courts, the U.S. legal system relies heavily upon precedents. And so the Supreme Court goes back and looks at other cases. And so in this case here, Moses Memorial Hospital, that's where that quote came from. Liberal federal policy favoring arbitration, quote unquote, is a direct quote from that case. And you're going to see it over and over and over again, that cases, precedents, prior cases are cited within a current opinion. And that's because that's how we get the common law. That is the so-called common law in the United States. The common law is developed over time as the courts make decisions on cases. So anyway, as you look at this, though, you'll see that this is directly word for word quoted in our textbook. You see that right here. Letter A, Section 2 reflects a, quote, liberal federal policy favoring arbitration. Now, our book took out all of the citations, but when you see quotes in these cases, know that those quotes, more likely than not, came from a previous case, unless, of course, maybe it's a direct quote from the plaintiff or the defendant. So you can see here, word for word, these are the words that the book puts in our book, and they got them straight out of the Supreme Court case here, in this case, the syllabus. Letter B, in Discover Bank, California Supreme Court held that class waivers, la-da-da-da-da. Letter B, in Discover Bank, the California Supreme Court held that class waivers, da-da-da-da-da. See, I think you're getting the idea. Our book is actually using the word for word from the Supreme Court case. Now, if we go back to the Supreme Court case, you'll see, of course, we've got the syllabus, and then at the end here, we can see that Scalia wrote the opinion, and then Roberts and Kennedy and Thomas and Alito all joined in. Then Thomas filed a concurring opinion. What does that mean? Well, Thomas felt so strongly about this that he wanted to write some more. So he wrote some additional bits of information, his own thoughts. Then Breyer filed a dissenting opinion in which Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and Kagan joined. And so those four came together and first of all disagreed with the other five, and they felt so strongly that they had Breyer write a dissenting opinion as to why the first five made a really bad decision. So you won't always see dissenting opinions. It's more common in Supreme Court cases, but it's even more rare that our book will actually let you know or print a dissenting opinion, but occasionally. So as we scroll through this case, you'll see here now that this is the actual opinion written by Scalia. Our book didn't use anything out of the actual opinion. It got everything from the syllabus there. But this is the actual opinion, and we can scroll through it. I'm going to scroll through it really quickly here, just so you can see the actual opinion is pretty lengthy, pretty verbose. But the court, is very careful to spell out all of its reasonings, why it's deciding the way it's deciding. And we can get to the end here, and it's almost there, I think. Here we go. It is so ordered. So this was 18 pages. The actual opinion was 18 pages. Then after that, here is Justice Thomas's concurring opinion, which is about, 4 or 5 pages? Just about a little over 5 pages. And then finally, here is the dissent. So if you are wondering, why did 4 of them disagree with this? Well, they're going to tell you why. And if you wanted to go in and read this dissent, then it might be fun for you to read it and see, okay, what's the other side of this? Why did they think AT&T should lose? And so anyway, that is the entire published opinion then, as you can see. And like I said, our book highly condenses it. It took those 4 A, B, C, and D points out of the syllabus and then gave us the conclusion and the final verdict here in that case.